My name is Cassandra Volpe-Hori. I'm Associate Vice Provost for Education and Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Stanford University. Through some really fortunate encounters with people who thought deeply about teaching and learning, gave me a chance to think in collaboration with faculty about teaching, to design courses. And over time, that passion grew, and I'm really delighted to be continuing to work in this field at the Center for Teaching and Learning at Stanford. So the Center for Teaching and Learning's programs and services follow its name really directly. We work on teaching and on learning. So for those with any kind of a teaching role at Stanford, whether those are undergraduate classes, graduate classes, whether those are faculty members, lecturers, teaching assistants, or even undergraduates in peer learning assistant type roles, we provide initial training, helping people get off the ground, understand the policies and methods that they will be using. We help folks get practice in those methods of teaching. And then we really follow people through their ongoing professional development in teaching.
I think CTL really brought us to the front of teaching. I see the combination about the collaboration and inspiration and innovation, which really helped me looking through the process of teaching, especially the learner-based teaching. Over the past several years, my students have given the evaluation of 4.94 out of 5, which I feel very honored, and I don't think it's possible without the CTL's advice.
For learners, we similarly are there to support their journey as learners at Stanford University. That can be as undergraduates who are first coming in, going through their first year curriculum. We provide them with opportunities to kind of get some academic support in ways that work for them. So that could be through peer tutoring, so that students really refine their approaches and we think become effective lifelong learners.
I grew up in North Dakota, so coming to Stanford was a pretty difficult transition for me. And I found a very cool program my first year, which was the Peer Learning Consultant Program. It was just starting with the Stanford Center for Teaching and Learning. And I got to be a part of this program from the incipient cohort and kind of shape and grow this program. And I actually liked working with the program so much that I continued doing so even after I graduated. So I graduated in 2021 and then continued for another couple years working with the program for a total of just about 6 years of watching it grow and continue. Now I have my own business called Esper Collective, where I teach soft skills to students. And a lot of the corporate teams, a lot of the intersection between the business and the technical and the creative worlds, a lot of those foundational skills were skills that I grew and that I learned and that I improved when I was working at the Stanford CTL.
I think one of the interesting things about the Center for Teaching and Learning at Stanford is that it was one of the early ones in the US. The creation of this center in 1975 still speaks in really relevant ways to what our most important values and work in teaching and learning is today.
I'm Michelle Marinkovich. I started at the Center for Teaching and Learning in 1977 as assistant director. I had been finishing my PhD research, which I was doing at the Hoover Archives. And one day, one of the people that I was working with, he told me that there was a job opening at the Center for Teaching and Learning. So he urged me to apply for the job. I went and talked to Jean Fetter about it because she was doing the interviews. So this was Professor Halliburton's office. In 1974, the Danforth Foundation solicited proposals for centers for teaching and learning at universities across the country. And one of them was at Stanford. Professor David Halliburton put it on firm footing and did the original work and secured the founding grant. So the Center for Teaching and Learning originally occupied these 3 offices on the second floor of what was then the Classics building and what's now Human Biology. Jean Fetter, now Jean Fetter Chu, was in that office. So I had my initial interview with her. But it was actually the last day of the job opening. So she said we better immediately go try to find Professor Halliburton. So she and I left here and we raced across the quad. And sure enough, we ran into Professor Halliburton. And Jean told him, well, I think you should interview Michelle. She's the one I'd recommend. And so David did. We sat down and that was the interview. When I was the assistant director, most of our work was focused on teaching assistants. There had been a handbook for TAs since very early on, and then I immediately concentrated on offering workshops to TAs. We also began to work with faculty. That was the result of something that was called the Fetter Committee. And one of the recommendations of the Fetter Committee was that the Center for Teaching and Learning should be open to faculty as well as to TAs. And that started really pretty much as I was becoming director, so it was very nice. I could immediately reach out to faculty as well as TAs. We did offer that videotaping to faculty very early on. Somebody recommended we employ master's students who were getting degrees in film and that we could hire them to do our videotaping. In 1984, CTL expanded because the Learning Assistance Center had been abolished, and its classes on learning and also the student peer tutoring that it had arranged and offered were transferred to the Center for Teaching and Learning. It was nice for us because we were not only working with teaching assistants and faculty on instruction, but we were working with undergraduate and graduate students on how to be better learners. This is something that actually almost no other teaching and learning centers at the time were doing. So we felt like pioneers too. So I felt like we had a much more rounded picture of the whole instructional experience.
You know, I have to say CTL from the very beginning of my time at Stanford back in 1986 was really important. I could immediately see it was a place where one could go and talk about teaching and approaches to teaching and how did you measure effectiveness in learning. So when I had opportunities to start getting involved in national projects and national grants related to advancing engineering education, CTL was a natural partner in that, in thinking not only about the science of learning, but for me, I'm also driven to take that research one might do on teaching and learning and how do you actually put it into the hands of educators. And so they just were great partners along that spectrum of activities.
The next period of significant expansion was in the 90s when Gerhard Casper became president, because Gerhard had a particular commitment to teaching excellence. And it eventually led to a proposal from us to have an oral communication program for undergraduates. And we were lucky enough to hire a Stanford PhD in English, Dory Allen, to be the director of the program in oral communication. And Dory immediately got the program off the ground. I'm very happy to say that the Center for Teaching and Learning gave birth to the oral communication program and brought it, I think, to maturity.
Welcome to the first of CTL's award-winning Teachers on Teaching series.
The award-winning Teachers on Teaching was an idea I'd been thinking about for a while. So it went on for years and years and years. And when we reached our 100th speaker in this series, we did have a special lecture by our then Dean, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, Harry Elam. And Harry gave a wonderful lecture on lecturing.
I also want to echo what the president said about Michelle, that Michelle isn't truly special. Her passion for teaching and learning, her commitment to Stanford and to Stanford faculty and students have been a major factor in CTL and its growth and evolution over the years. As you all probably know, Michelle is a leader nationally and even internationally in this field. And this recognition has only helped to further her reputation at CTL as a model for others to emulate. So on this day, Michelle, we toast and thank you for all you've done and all you do for CTL and Stanford.
Michelle helped build the field of teaching and learning centers. She was one of maybe 4 or 5 people across the country that literally built out what teaching and learning centers could do and should do.
Hey everybody, it's great to see you here early on a Friday morning. My name is Robin Dunbar. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education and the Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning.
Prior to coming to Stanford, I had been in pretty typical faculty positions. And at the time, it was Michelle was here as director, and as we talked, we evolved the job to involve not only TA training, that was fantastic, but also working with faculty. And that was just my dream job at that point. So that's really how it got launched. And a brand new area for CTL. They had not had a focus prior to that on the ability to focus with someone with a science background in science and engineering. She's an amazing relationship builder. I'll just laugh. That's something she does naturally. In my case, I had to work at it. Is when I started and I was moving out to the departments and building those relationships to help bridge that to become a hub for bringing people together, for providing resources. First of all, CTL was small. I think there might have been 6 of us, including the folks who helped with the administrative back end. So one of the things that I emphasized when I came in was the power of CTL as a hub. You know, we could help nucleate that community, we could bring them together, we could support them with resources and development. So that's one of the priorities. A huge priority for me was to continue to grow local resources outside of CTL and figure out what it took for those to be successful and make sure we could help make them successful. What we would now call discipline-based education research, that we were really truly developing an understanding not just of how people learn, but how they learn. We're really at the lead on making space to think about learning in the discipline. I didn't want CTL to be the place associated with best practices. I wanted it to be the place associated with what works. You know, what do you need? We can help you figure out what works.
So I was lucky enough to be accepted onto a course design institute. At that time it was run by Robin Wright Dunbar, and I remember immediately having the sense of I was in the classroom myself now. I was learning, and it was very much a case of seeing how you could reshape what you thought had worked for years by a process of really reconsidering your audience. So all of a sudden, my teaching went from being about what I knew to being about what the student needed to know. And that was maybe a subtle pivot on the outside, but it's a really fundamental one. And Robin was absolutely fantastic in taking the whole, that particular design institute, taking all of us through, and really with a lot of freedom, we were allowed to sort of think outside the box and reshape our course. And so the help I was given was very fundamental at one level, but also conceptual. How do I conceive of my course? Who am I teaching for? You're not teaching for yourself, you're teaching for your students, and you should always keep that in mind.
Some of the areas that I would say CTL has the most impact in today, that they were just beginning to be seeds. And part of our role was to help recognize when those seeds were there and plant some seeds where we could.
I'm Maria Denman, and I was a member of CTL starting in 2004 until 2021. I want to talk about programs that are still going on and where I played a certain role to help them launch. The three that I want to talk about is peer-to-peer academic skills program, the TA teaching certificate, the CERTL certificate, and then also teaching commons. So the peer coaching program was really important to me in the sense that I felt it's very important that students become aware of their own learning. We're preparing them, it's our mission to prepare them for lifelong learning. And often they don't know how to learn. And so supporting them in that, and not just undergraduates, but also graduate students, is an important piece of their experience. And expanding that area, I think, was, for me, that was really important. We used to have a very dedicated team that offered individual coaching sessions, which was great, but it didn't reach as many. And there were different levels of engaging students about their own learning. That is now possible.
As much as possible in our work, we normalize struggle and difficulty as part of the learning process. Those peer experiences and peer support can be really powerful. It's one thing, I think, for us as professional staff to tell a student struggle is normal, but when they hear that from another student, when they're being tutored by a student who took that class a year or two ago and is telling them that they also had struggled with that material and now they're a tutor for the course, peer experiences and peer support is important.
All of the peer tutors are students. We share the same experiences, we've gone through those same classes, and so I think that helps them get a little bit more comfortable, seeing that there's someone like them that they can talk to and discuss concepts with without having this kind of power dynamic that goes on with TAs and professors. I think oftentimes people get shy asking questions to TAs or professors because they seem so far removed from the students, right? But when you have a peer tutor who's your same age, who took the class with you, it's the student and the student, and they talk to each other. And they ask each other questions, and they say, oh, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And if they get confused, then they can come to a tutor to clarify some things. And so I think it's a highly collaborative environment. And I think that's what makes it very special.
CTL has coaches who bring that expertise into their work, and they provide specialized support for students with ADHD, autism, learning differences, and other neurodiverse conditions to help them succeed and thrive at Stanford.
I always felt that TA training could be enhanced. Having a certificate, I think, was always my dream. So when Gloriana put together a fantastic proposal to bring CERTL to Stanford, I was absolutely thrilled. That proposal was instrumental in convincing the VPOE, VPGE to endorse it.
I'm so inspired by the work that we do in the CTL. The expertise, the care that comes with the work within the academic teaching programs team is really exceptional. And I'm just so delighted and privileged to work with the team and to see the effect that our work has on campus, not just in individual workshop moments, but in multi-year moments when we talk to instructors after having worked with them 5-10 years ago, and they still remember something that we said or recommended, and they still do it, and it still has an impact on their teaching.
Working with CTL and helping out with that grant, I believe that has made me a stronger instructor and a stronger researcher. So for example, now I, as a researcher, like to partner with my Center for Teaching and Learning at Ohio State University. Kritika and Gloriana really did a great job. In that time, we were able to not only get feedback about our writing, but we were able to meet with our collaborators and talk about the project ideas. And then Cassandra has also been really helpful for us to kind of keep the sustainability of the program overall.
For many, it's the first time that they're learning about pedagogy or how to teach. And so Tarani is one of the examples of a graduate teaching consultant who I think learned a lot and continues to share that learning in her new role.
I have to say it shaped maybe 80 or 85% of what I'm currently doing with my teaching. I feel like I'm really using what I have learned at CTL on a daily basis. It literally made me who I am today, my experience at CTL.
And the last thing, Teaching Commons. There was a Teaching Commons in place way back. I personally always felt, is there a way to have a public discourse about teaching, not just in your own discipline, but across, because our students are kind of omnivores. So this idea of having a commons, a place where instructors and faculty can stay learners, was always really important to me. The Teaching Commons, I didn't launch it in a way back, that was someone else supporting that team that designed the proposal, and they designed an excellent concept. And to see that come to fruition again, that just makes my day, because that wasn't there before, and it's one of these things that I had hoped for during my entire career. It was missed by the campus, so there was a push from those people who had interacted with us a lot, mostly faculty, but also other units, that we miss CTL, we need to put it back.
It was not completely obvious what had happened to CTL. That I remember that having some faculty conversations, and people were like, where did CTL go? And so there was a gap. In late 2019, I was fortunate enough to become Vice Provost for undergraduate education. And so I was brought on board to work with the new director for CTL, Marriott Denman, to really sort of put CTL back into its prominent position as an important resource for teaching and learning at the university. And that gave, I think, CTL opportunities because they were integrated in a much larger organization with many, many different teaching and student support units. And CTL is a very important part of VPUE.
Looking at the 50th anniversary, I think if you look at a recent year, 23-24, CTL helped train over 1,000 faculty and lecturers in group settings. More than 1,000 graduate students or TAs or postdocs in group settings, did individual consultations with more than 150 instructors, had more than 5,000 peer-to-peer tutoring sessions, students helping students, and had more than 1,500 academic coaching sessions. When you step back, what that means is that students will get more out of Stanford because faculty are more effective and the students are more effective about how they approach their education.
I guess I hope the legacy will be that teaching does matter enormously, that it makes a difference for students.
CTL was successful and is successful with faculty because they realized that we save them time.
The great thing about CTL is that it's staffed by experts who care deeply about their work and who care deeply about improving their work.
We're on the ground with people. We hear from them directly through various feedback mechanisms.
Every year we see about 1,400 or 1,500 undergraduates, and so when I think about that impact multiplied times 1,400 or 1,500 students, I think it's a really powerful impact that our team has.
CTL, through its Curriculum Transformation Institute, is helping departments across the university. That's making Stanford a more accessible and equitable place.
So the work that we do to make teaching and learning as optimal, as effective, as transformative as it can be here at Stanford is part of our contribution to the world and to democracy itself.
I'm really excited about what the next 50 years will bring for CTL.